back, and of course, all eyes continue to be on the Middle East, and I am so honored and very timely to have back with us today Jonathan Tobin. He's the editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. He's the host of Top Story with Jonathan Tobin on the JNS Syndicate. He's a senior contributor to The Federalist and a columnist for the New York Post and Newsweek and other outlets. And you can go to jns.org, which stands for the Jewish News Syndicate. Jonathan, my friend, good to see you. How are you?
Thank God. Great to be back with you. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Well, a lot to talk about. What is your current thoughts about the Trump's administration's approach to Gaza?
Well, I think, it's complicated, not surprisingly. I think Trump is definitely onto something with his plan for reconstructing Gaza and allowing the Palestinian Arabs who live there to leave rather than being kept, as they have been by Arab countries and by their leaders like Hamas, basically imprisoned there because they are props in this century-old war against Israel and the Jews. Trump also has played a role, even before he became president, in negotiating a ceasefire hostage deal with Hamas, and that's more problematic. And it's put Israel in a very difficult position. And Prime Minister Netanyahu has been, it's interesting in that Netanyahu has domestic constraints. He needs to do everything he can to get the hostages, the remaining hostages, out of Gaza, those who are alive, retrieve the bodies of those who were murdered. And Trump is also, after kind of maneuvering him into a situation where he had to accept this really a terrible deal, because they're releasing, hundreds and over 1,000 murderers, terrorist murderers with blood on their hands in order to get the hostages. And with Hamas thinking that they're going to be left in power, and Trump is saying, oh, you don't have to go through with it now. We can just unleash hell on Gaza, that's good. There's moral clarity there. But also Netanyahu needs to try to get the hostages out. He needs to save those lives. So he's sort of between the devil and the deep blue sea there. And he's trying to negotiate it and try to get through. And we're about to have something happen tomorrow that sort of really sums up this war in a nutshell, in that the Hamas is releasing, along with a few more hostages this weekend. Tomorrow they're releasing the bodies of 4 hostages who were murdered in Gaza, including Shiri Bibas and her 2 little children, Ariel and Kafir, who were 4 years old and 9 months old when they were kidnapped by these monsters. And I think this occurrence, the retrieval of these bodies of these people that, so many decent people around the world, not just Jews, not just Israelis, were praying for their safety. 2 little boys, a toddler and an infant, and their terrified mother. And those who have been demonstrating in this country on behalf of Hamas against Israel, they need to come face to face with the fact that they are supporting baby killers. I can't put it any more bluntly than that. The murderers of this family, they should not be rewarded. And we need more moral clarity. And when the dust settles, these baby killers have to be eradicated.
Okay, there's a lot here. Do you think they'll ever reach a point where all the hostages are released?
I'm doubtful about that. Hamas is still holding on to the bodies of Israelis who were killed in 2014. Hamas is still holding on to hostages that they took, Israeli hostages from a decade ago. They do this because, like the criminals that they are, it's their leverage. They're never going to give up all of their leverage, which is the problem. And, Israel's a small country, and, the pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu, like the pressure in the past on other Western leaders, like President Reagan, to, ransom hostages held by Islamists is enormous. To be in Israel, I just got back from a couple of weeks in Israel, and, it's a country still suffering from PTSD from October 7th and from the war where hundreds of brave young soldiers have been killed in this fight against evil. And, there's pressure on Netanyahu. He needs to not do anything that would prevent some of these hostages from being freed. But in the end, there's no avoiding the fact that Hamas is going to have to be destroyed. And once it's clear that there are no more hostages coming out, Israel's going to have to resume this war. And hopefully, I'm saying, God willing, Trump in the United States will be on Israel's side against the baby killers, because that is the key point.
Yeah. I understand this pressure. I mean, I get what you're saying. At the same time, because hostages are the ultimate leverage that Hamas has, Netanyahu and Trump have to reach a point where there's a line in the sand and they're done with this and finish the job. Do you think that's in the near future?
I don't know. I mean, I have to be honest. This is a very difficult political situation. It's easier for Trump to say, you know what, this is terrible. It's a terrible deal. He needs to own that he helped foist this deal on Israel. Let's not avoid that fact, because he wanted the good atmospherics and the visuals of, no fighting going on when he was sworn in on Inauguration Day. But at some point, you're right, Israel will have to make that choice. But doing so is politically perilous for Israel's leader, and he's trying to, do it. He is hoping that point will come when there is a consensus that it's Hamas, as it has been all along, that is the obstacle to any further releases. And when that happens, the war will resume, and the fight to destroy evil must end with Hamas's destruction. Any other result is not just a victory for Iran, not just a victory for Hamas, it's a victory for evil.
Okay.
And the release of the Bibas corpses should remind us of that.
I totally get that. I totally get that. So let me ask you this. It's not that Hamas doesn't read the news or hear about it, that the rhetoric from both Israel and the United States is complete annihilation of Hamas. No negotiations. Their future is marked. In the meantime, the hostages and the leverage of the hostages buys time. Is it possible, in the meantime, the United States and Israel moves on Iran as a supreme message to Hamas?
Well, the thing about Hamas is that they're evil, but they're clever. Every little maneuver that they do, which is torturing the families of the hostages, torturing the Israeli people with drip, drip, drip of hostages. And, they released Yarden Bibas, the father and husband of these poor people who were murdered, these children and this young woman who was murdered by Hamas in Gaza after they had been taken captive, kidnapped from their home on October 7th, 2023. All these maneuvers are designed to increase the pressure on the Israeli people and on Netanyahu. Now, you say, while this is happening, will the United States and Israel unite to do something about Iran? That would be a good idea, but I don't think it's in the works. When Prime Minister Netanyahu was in the United States 2 weeks ago and had a series of meetings with Trump, they agreed on everything. My information is that they agreed on everything except Iran. Trump doesn't want fighting with Iran. He wants to use his leverage and sanctions to force Iran to make a deal that would give up their nuclear program. If that could happen, that would be great. But the Iranians are very good at dragging out negotiations. I think it's probably a mistake for Trump to do that. I think there is a window of opportunity, and the Israelis were pointing that out to him, that after Israel destroyed Iran's air defenses last year, when President Biden forbade them from attacking their nuclear program, they did take out the air defenses. But those air defenses will be rebuilt soon enough, whether it's from Russian missiles or some other source. And when that happens, it will be much harder to take the necessary steps to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear power. Already it's a threshold nuclear power. They're very close to it. This is something where the United States and the Trump administration, I think, needs to be more realistic about Iran, because right now it appears that they are pumping the brakes on any Israeli effort to destroy that regime, or to at least destroy their nuclear power.
Wow. All right, let me take a quick break. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, Jonathan has a website, jns.org, which is the Jewish News Syndicate. He is the editor-in-chief there. Check it out. It's very resourceful, jns.org. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and what an honor and timely honor to have with us again today Jonathan Tobin. He's the editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate, and he also hosts the top stories there with Jonathan Tobin on JNS. That is the website, jns.org, and there's the picture of the landing page. Jonathan, I was trying to think of this question during the break, but let me just see if I could frame it right. It's considered that Israel's intelligence is probably the best in the world. They just are good at it. Do you think they know where the hostages are?
Well, I think it's possible they know where some of them are. Gaza is a warren. Hamas, with the billions of philanthropic donations from the West, Hamas built the moral equivalent of the New York subway system under Gaza. Finding these people there, they're largely surrounded by, they are surrounded by Hamas operatives, Hamas leaders, and attacking them in the tunnels may very well, guarantee that they're going to be killed. And Israel has tried to do everything it could to get them out alive. Israeli intelligence is great. Just ask Hezbollah, just ask Iran, just ask Syria. It's been less successful in Gaza just because the environment there is so much more difficult to penetrate. If Israel could have rescued all of the hostages, they would have. Let me assure you of that. Mm-hmm. But they're being held in these tunnels in a way that makes it very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get them out alive. And that's why they have not tried to do so when it is obvious that the only thing that they'd be saving is corpses. They want to save these people. They wanted to get those children out. Unfortunately, they were murdered first.
I guess that the other part of this, Jonathan, that seems to be mind-bending, especially to me and others, is that it appears now that Egypt is somewhat complicit. The tunnels go to Egypt. Mm-hmm. The supplies came from Egypt. What's going on here?
Egypt has always been to some degree complicit. Egypt kind of plays a double game. On the one hand, the Sisi military government of Egypt kind of looks to Israel as an ally against Iran, like the Saudis, and as well as the fact that their main enemy, the Egyptians' main enemy, is the Muslim Brotherhood, which is trying to overthrow the government there. The Muslim Brotherhood is directly allied with Hamas. That's why they don't want to take any Palestinian, refugees from Gaza into Egypt, because they consider them a mortal threat. And, they're not wrong to consider them a mortal threat. Mm-hmm. But it's also true that the tunnels that exist, that run from Egypt into Gaza, they have been closed at times over the years, and they were open at times, during the years. Egypt makes a lot of money from Hamas and from their Iranian, funders in allowing, number one, people to get out of Gaza who can afford the, thousands of dollars to bribe the Egyptians. That's an underreported story. And also to import some of the arms that they used on October 7th. And so it's, Egypt is playing a double game. It's a U.S. ally. It's an Israel ally. It's also, to some extent, it's a broker, and not a dishonest broker with Hamas. And, it's one of these great underreported stories. Another great underreported story, which I was, saw a lot of, is that there's still so many, we hear about Palestinian refugees. There's still thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of Israeli refugees who have not been able to go back to their homes either along the Gaza border because of the war or along the northern border with Lebanon because it's not safe yet.
Yeah.
They're still living in hotels in the middle of Israel for like a year and a half. It's outrageous, and the Western media never reports about it.
Yeah, and that's still very unstable. A little bit of a hypothetical, but if Hamas is removed completely, who then would govern Gaza?
That's the big question. There is no neutral. I think the idea that somehow that's been floated over the last year and a half that somehow the Arab nations or the Europeans or Americans will somehow provide a peacekeeping force, or that the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria, that they can govern it. None of those are answers. None of those. Number one, the Arab and neither the Arabs nor the Europeans nor the United States wants to have troops on the ground in Gaza. Israel doesn't want American troops on the ground in Gaza because then they'd just be targets. Putting the Palestinian Authority there in charge there is just another way of saying, the terrorism will continue. They subsidize terrorism, and they hate Fatah, the main party in the Palestinian Authority, hates Hamas because Hamas murdered so many of them when they took over Gaza in 2007. But they can't be trusted to keep the peace. They don't believe in peace any more than Hamas does.
Yeah.
Right now, if Hamas can be eradicated, if the world will let Israel eradicate Hamas, as President Trump seems to be indicating he wants to let Israel do that, right now, the only force that can guarantee Israel's security from Gaza is Israel. That's a brutal reality. That's not something that Israelis want. They left Gaza in 2005. They withdrew every soldier, settler, and settlement in the hope that it would be an incubator for peace or they would be left alone. And instead, it turned into a terrorist state. And there is no way of getting around the fact, and that's why Trump is right to just say, take the Palestinians out of Gaza, because unless you do, you're going to have a terrorist state, because these people, I'm not, it's not a matter of hating them. Their national identity is inextricably tied up with the century-old war on Israel, on the Hamas effort to destroy Israel and to commit the genocide of its population. Anything that allows them to remain in power, or to another variant on Hamas to remain in power, means the war continues, and we can look forward to more October 7th atrocities. And that's not something Israel or the United States should allow to happen. Okay,
so I'm going to run out of time here. See if I can squeeze in one more question. President Trump said a week ago at 12 noon on Saturday, hell would break loose if they weren't all released. And then he defers it and say, well, at the end of the day, quote unquote, that's Bibi's decision. So he left that with Netanyahu. It did release a few more hostages, but not all. So I'm wondering if the bottom line here, you have to cut the head off the snake. We're back to Iran. Could Israel move on Iran, not necessarily with the United States, do it on their own?
Well, it will be Israeli, if there is a green light from the United States, the forces attacking Iran will likely be Israeli, not American,
right,
even though America has far more capabilities. But right now, I don't see a green light from Trump on that. As I said, it was the one point of disagreement between Trump and Netanyahu. And I can guarantee you that Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu will not do anything that President Trump doesn't want them to do. Trump is a good ally of Israel. He's given it backing in so many important ways. And as much as I think Trump is probably wrong about holding off attacking Iran, Israel will not fight Trump. Israel will stick to Trump.
30 seconds. Does the Abrahamic peace accord hold together?
Well, it will hold together. Question of whether it's going to be expanded with the Saudis, I'm skeptical about that right now. I think securing Israel's borders, defeating Hamas is actually more important than having an embassy in Riyadh.
Jonathan, thank you. We value your time greatly and look forward to more visits. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, jns.org, that is the Jewish News Syndicate. That is the place to go to get informed, jns.org. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.